All right, I'm calling to order the General Services Committee meeting. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll ask Chris to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'll take a roll call. Councilmember Gulling.
Here.
Councilmember Cummings.
Here.
Council President Mantello.
Here.
Councilmember December, also present. And Councilmember Kennedy, also present. We're holding this meeting for the updates on the Mount Ida Dam. And if I'd like to make a recommendation, if the public is okay to wait for the presentation first, and because Chris is going to give us updated information on what's been going on, and then we can hold the public comment at the end of the meeting. Council President?
I may have to leave a little bit early, but I was handed from Suzanne Martin Petty a petition that she asked me to give to you. I'll give it to Mara so she can make copies or email scan it. You can scan it, okay?
Thank you.
I believe there's 260?
285.
285.
285 signatures? Okay.
And the petition is to ask for a long-term plan, correct?
Preserve the lake and repair the dam.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll make sure to get copies of that for the council. Yes, like I said, let's please start with the presentation from Chris Whelan. And once the presentation is done, then we can have the public comments at the end.
Thank you very much. So really, we just want to give an update of kind of where we are now. It seems that the discussion has kind of come that they think that there's a general overview. Can you hear me all right? That there's a general overview that this emergency work is permanent work. This is not permanent work. The permanent work has yet to be decided. This is to take care of the structural issue that's on the dam now, to protect people downstream along Ida Canal, based on the inundation map, which we do have. We'll hand that out in a moment. This is temporary work where the long term will be put into the permit when DEC gives it to us. So what's happened since? We submitted all the paperwork to DEC to get the permit. That was also sent to SHPO and Army Corps of Engineers. Army Corps of Engineers does not have any comment on it to date. They have no issue with it. They understand it. SHPO had a couple clarifications that our engineers sent some more information back to SHPO, and it took care of that. I received today at 5:00. Yes.
Councilmember Cummings. Were you going to say you received something from SHPO or?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Well, I got the whole update.
Yeah,
Take a moment to get there.
Took care of it.
Yep. At 5:02 today, I received an email from our engineers from SHPO. They have no concern with the emergency work. And in it, it states that they suggest a dam or some sort of structure does remain on site. That I have clarification to find out for sure what that means. Does that be a wooden structure? Could it be some sort of other structure? Is there a height that they're refraining from? There's clarifications that have to go with that. Based on what their answers might be, I don't know if it's suggested, I don't know if it's mandatory or not, but I still, again, it came in at 5:02 today. So we're working on that now. We've had many discussions with Ampersand. The hydro plant just downstream, they have some serious concerns about the sediment through the emergency process. There's either way, if we do this emergency process, there's a sediment issue. If we don't do it and it breaches, there's a larger sediment issue. So either way, there's an issue with sediment. It kind of comes back in my mind to protecting public health, public property downstream. So we're working with them through that. They had their engineer, they requested to have Kleinschmidt, the original developers, engineers for that dam, actually take a look at it. They did. They came back with a report that they did a topical view of the dam and that they looked at our Schnabel's engineering report and made a determination that the dam was sound, that there was no They did not see anything that would suggest that it's going to fail. That was then sent, they sent that to DEC. I had conversations with our engineers, Schnabel Engineering. We had conversations with DEC. Concern was that Kleinschmidt was not able to actually get under the nap of the dam and under the dam to take a look at the actual wooden structures. So their basis is based on, it was a 2-page report based on pictures they saw from the original, from Schnabel Engineering. Talking to Schnabel Engineering, Kleinschmidt did not contact them to get further information. So there's some concerns with not Kleinschmidt themselves, but the actual completed review that was done. So based on that, we are setting up a meeting with DEC representatives, Troy representatives, Schnabel Engineering, Ampersand, and Kleinschmidt to sit down and have a discussion. Did a doodle poll last week, trying to get something done this week. That wasn't going to happen. It looks like it's going to be the beginning of January before that meeting occurs. What else do I got in there? The inundation map. What is done, what Schnabel did as part of their project was actual modeling of the posting kill. So this does not have anything to do with the Hudson River. So this is just based on normal flow of the Hudson. This is just based on the posted kill itself and the 100-year flood. The posted kill, we do not have a 100-year flood on record with the posted kill. Irene was under 100 years. I think we have like 83 or 87 years. So there has not been a 100-year flood on the posted kill. With Irene, the water did overtop the abutments, which is what one of the major concerns was, and what FEMA gave money for was redoing the abutments. It was undermining the abutments and therefore weakening the dam itself. So part of that was to go through and kind of look at it at the 100-year flood, which is a standard that DEC looks at for dams. So when you look at these, all these will be posted to the website also, just let everybody else know so you can see what's going on. There was some concern. It's been notified as a Class A dam. So when you look at the first one of not the one that has 150%, the original one, that is with it as a Class A dam based on how much water is behind the dam. So if the dam were to breach, it actually covers the blue area. Okay, the red area is a natural 100-year flood prone. So under just natural conditions, the 100-year flood of a posted kill would flood everything inside that red line. If the dam breaks, it then adds that blue line. And it shows 0 to 5 feet of water in there. When you look up on the posted kill within the red line, just kind of mid-range, it looks like it's not covered at all. That's actually gray. That would be 5 to 10 feet of water in that area. Now this is based on the topo of the area and water levels themselves. So when they looked at that, then DEC also requires that they do a study going further on and see what the condition would be, if it were a Class B dam. So the study was done, and it actually shows that that dam is a Class B dam, not a Class A dam. I asked Schnabel today, I said, say it's a Class B dam, are we on the verge from a Class A to a Class B, or a Class B to a Class C? He said, we're actually on the verge of a Class B to a Class C. It's almost considered a high hazard dam, which would be equivalent to Wright and Bradley Lake or the Tom Hannock, or the other 3 high hazard dams that the city owns. So when you
And
look,
sorry, Chris, who said that about the?
that was Schnabel Engineering.
That was Schnabel. Okay.
Yep. So when you look at that inundation map that shows 150%, you see the red line, that the normal flooding of the posted kill during a 100-year storm. And then the blue shaded area outside that red line actually shows the inundation of where the water level would be if the dam were to breach. So based on so many houses, so many dollars in property value outside that normal flood zone is what considers that dam to be a Class B dam. So that was done. Schnabel's a little concerned about heading this on because it's going to put that dam under a whole different scrutiny with DEC. and could significantly impact residents down along Ida or Canal that are inside that flood zone. Meaning flood insurance, meaning other sorts of insurance or precautions that need to be taken for flooding. That is part of the,
I have a question.
This-
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's a specific question, yeah, go ahead.
I want a clarification on that. Now, who is deciding that it's almost like gone to the D?
Schnabel Engineering.
Your engineering firm that Troy employed.
Yep.
Make this report.
Yep.
Is there any way that we could get another opinion about that?
That would be a cost that we would have to incur to get that done.
But
Usually
I don't-
DEC would then go back through and double check and make sure that everything is in line. Once this is
that's
submitted to DEC.
My issue with the Chernobyl report is that it was an employed firm that issued this report by the city of Troy, so I can't help but suspect that it's gonna be skewed the way that you guys wanted it to go.
So they have to put their license stamp on those documents, and it's actually under their liability, under their design liability. So, I mean, that's not something that engineers take lightly. So their firm reputation as well as their liability is at risk if they were not to do something correctly. And like Chris said, DEC will actually verify that before, and DEC is the one who classifies it,
Right.
not the engineering firm. So the engineering firm,
I researched, it said it was a class action.
correct, it's
I
labeled
question
now,
marks over it.
right now, it's labeled as such.
Yes,
Correct.
thank you. Councilmember Cummings.
So just to clarify this process, the engineering firm did a model about how high the water would go if we were at maximum flood and the dam broke. If these now go to the DEC will make a determination based on the properties that are within this newly flooded area and say, this is a high enough level of damage that we consider it Class B.
It would also force them to actually model that stream themselves
Okay.
and determine if, yes, they are correct or no, they are not correct. If Schnabel is correct or not.
Great.
DEC doesn't have the capacity to do this on every stream at will. So what they do is they wait for an engineering firm or somebody like that to come in that has an issue and says, hey, we have an issue with our dam. All right, what's the model show? This is what the model shows. Then they review that before they reclassify a dam. They won't just do it willy-nilly. It's up to DEC to make that determination. It's not up to our engineers. Our engineers are just stating that based on the model and the information they have, the flow data they have, that it should be a Class B dam.
You have more presentation, right?
Yes.
I'll hold there for questions.
Okay, thank you. As part of the permit process with DEC, they did want a schedule to come up with a final alternative or final project, what's going to be there, which is kind of where, in my head, the discussion's always been going, is what's going to be there in 2 years. Now what's going to be there in 2 months. I'm concerned with the long term. So we came up with a schedule. They have yet to confirm it. Again, they were waiting for SHPO to give the final determination, which came out today. So I would anticipate with the holidays that SHPO or that DEC come back with that permit probably first or second week of January. And in that permit, we'll have a schedule of compliance. This is what we drafted to them. They can modify it however they see fit. That will be part of the permit. So this isn't going to be a project that's going to be just forgotten about. There will be hard deadlines in there that the city will have to meet or come up with valid terms of why we can't meet them. And even then, my experience with DEC is it's hard to get them to change the date just based on, well, I didn't get time to get to it. It's more of, we're having issues finding funding, we're having concerns, something else came up in that area that we're reviewing to make sure it's all incorporated into one project. It's not just the, I didn't get to it. I think, going through my notes, I believe that's everything that's occurred to date and kind of what's going to go on into the near future. Waiting for the DEC permit, getting together with Ampersand and Kleinsmith with DEC and our engineers so they can understand what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. And wait for the permit to be issued.
At this point, are they waiting until after that meeting to issue that? Or-
That's up to DEC. DEC will make the determination of when they issue the permit or how they issue it. For the city liability standpoint, we've requested it, we're waiting for a response.
Council President.
Chris, just a quick question. On the December 3rd to the 28th, is that a hard deadline, the 28th, or no? This is you.
This was a draft that we
Got it.
sent them back at the end of November,
Okay,
so that has already passed.
okay, fair enough.
We were anticipating the permit to come in, and we're anticipating that work to be completed by the time the snow fell.
Okay.
I just gave a copy of the Shiva letter that we received at 5:02.
Thank you.
We'll put the, I'm sorry,
What's the date?
December 20th, and we
Today.
received it today at
Sure.
5:02.
Council Member Gully.
Chris, based on this drawdown of Vital Lake going on until December 28th, we know that's gonna be behind. But how far down the line will we be able to catch up to this schedule, or are you gonna have to remodify all these dates?
I assume right before DEC issues the permit, they'll probably ask us that, since we already missed that first date, that they either ask us for a revised schedule, or they'll push everything out that amount of time. You know, if they give us to the end of January to do the breach, they'll push everything out 30 days. It's typically how they run.
So just the first 3 tasks will probably be transitioned to different dates.
Correct. We'll have to wait, that's a DEC determination. It's
Sure.
based on if they come back and ask us for a revised schedule due to timing, or if they just say we're gonna add 30 days to everything and issue the permit that way.
Okay, thank you.
So
And I'm sorry, Chris, you might have already answered this, but do you have any anticipation of what that timeline looks like for DEC to get back to us?
that is within, that's within Region 4 DEC.
Okay. Councilmember Cummings.
So if the lake freezes over before this permit's issued, do you have a plan to continue that work in those conditions, or would it mean waiting and sort of guarding against ice flows and other things in the meantime?
My major concern is that there is an ice jam that takes out the dam.
Mine too.
And that's what I don't want the 2 o'clock in the morning phone call with 3 inches of rain coming in tomorrow, that ice took the dam out, and what are we gonna do? You sit and watch. Call the fire department, do evacuation. That's all there is. That's what I don't want to happen. We'll have to wait and see how heavy the ice is, how close the ice comes. We'll work with the engineers and the contractor, what their experience is, and what their comfort level is with working with those conditions.
And just to be clear for the public, do we have a map of dam breach in a sort of normal, not 100-year flood condition, just sort of a all-day rainstorm?
And just an everyday rainstorm, if we were to go right now, there would be minimal damage.
Would
no
not.
flooding.
Probably breached.
But DEC standards bases everything on the 100
No,
years.
sorry, and that's obviously we need to be ready for it.
That's, yeah, you don't know when it's gonna come. And I like to gamble myself, but I'm not gonna gamble that we're not gonna get a 100-year storm in March.
What are the sort of weather patterns? When would 100-year floods be more or less likely?
They typically occur every 100 years.
But it's usually caused by a hurricane, right?
When was the last
Well,
one?
No, I mean, you
in some
have one
areas, Irene was a 100-year storm.
along the Mohawk, there were
Right.
very
Yes.
floods.
In this
Is it ever
area,
caused
But it
by
happened to
ice
us.
melt and snow melt?
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be just a storm
Ends in the
Irene, it
summer.
just sits over one area. It could be multiple factors. It could be saturation rate of the soils, 2 inches of rain on top of it.
I mean, 1995 was the other big one for the city that took out like all the stuff at City Hall and stuff like that. So, I mean, it just depends. And that was an ice jam issue. But since then, along the Mohawk, they've installed some technology to give forewarning and the levees and all that other kind of stuff that they've done. So the state's actually increased their technology to be able to help downstream, but they also have to moderate their flows too. So if the Mohawk is high, they got to release that too. So that's for the Hudson River piece of that, but you know, whatever's up
We
in
don't
the
have those
90
controls
mile,
here.
right, the 90-mile square watershed that we're pulling into that creek, you know, that's part of the concern too. And, you know, we're just actually thankful right now we don't have 2 feet of snow sitting somewhere.
maybe except for a ski lodge, but.
And take into consideration, these inundation maps don't incorporate the Hudson River at all. So if the Hudson River is in flood stage already, it's only gonna make that worse. Because the water won't be able to get down to the river. Right now, it's considered that, those maps are considered the river at normal level, which would allow most of the Poston Hill to get to the river.
So I'm just gonna, so part of the conversation that we've had is about the pictures, right? So just actually what the conditions are underneath the dam. So, you know, and I think everybody has seen the reports, but I printed some of them out just in case you haven't seen them. And you can see where the actual sediment is. They actually, it's good because the picture shows you where they shoveled it out and have seen the sediment. There's like 6 inches of sediment underneath. But then also one of the areas where there's the flex in the wood, that's like 4 to 5 inches where it's deflected. And then there's also the leaks that are coming through the wood. So there's 3 sets of pictures here, if you just want to circulate them, just to review them. They're on the website, but just so you have a little bit more, in case some of you weren't at the last meeting.
Just to let you know, those are 2x8s or 4x8s that are tracked.
How many of the 4x8s are cracked?
He didn't hear you.
Yeah, it was considerable. That was only one area. There was a couple areas that had that. I think in that area it shows like 5 sections that are cracked. But you can see kind of ridge line going up through the dam.
Are they in the middle of the dam or at the top or bottom?
They're kind of right in the middle.
Vertical.
Yes.
We had one discussion with some concerned residents around whether there might be an option to sort of armor the dam temporarily with a steel plate or something like that. Is that something that was looked at by the engineers?
Even to do that, now you gotta get down, you still gotta remove the sediment.
Yeah.
You still gotta get down to the natural wood. And then you have to attach the armor plate to the wood somehow. You still have to de-water the pond to get to it to do it properly.
Could you maybe like could they do a cofferdam, de-water, get to?
We looked at doing coffer dams. It's all bedrock behind it. There's nowhere to really implement to get the coffer dam down into to hold to do the work.
But I think if you could clear with the hydro shovel, clear the sediment off of the top of a section. And then
I'm not an engineer. I don't know.
I guess I'm sort of also getting at the concern I have with this mitigation action in terms of have we gotten any modeling about what it looks like how much we'll back up into Ida Lake if we do this mitigation action and then it gets clogged with ice or sticks during the flood.
The mitigation action will be able to build a temporary road to that opening so we can get vehicles in there, we can get backhoes in there to get that debris out.
During a 100-year flood?
Well, not during a 100-year flood, all bets are off on everything. I mean, all
that's
bets are off on this
the
damn
core concern that we're concerned about here, is what happens during
Even
100 years.
Irene, which was less than a 100-year flood, we had issues with the abutments. You get the 100-year flood, the abutments will be gone, the dam's out of there.
Right.
So even if the wood was fine.
So my core question now is, during the lead up to that flood, does the Ida Lake back up and create a head that's as strong as what they're concerned about here? And then is it just as likely or more likely to break because we've taken the middle out of the dam?
Well, the idea is to keep the creek going through that opening.
Sure.
So yes,
I guess
just by taking out
that's
the
a good-
4x8s, if the water were to rise behind it,
Right.
it could hold the water as long as that opening is still open, which we anticipate it to be open because knowing of a storm like that, like the guys today were out cleaning off catch basins, cleaning out overflows, getting ready for the storms tomorrow.
Right.
This would go onto our list to clean out before storms come.
But obviously during a flood, or particularly during an ice flow, you're gonna have a lot of debris coming down and getting caught on these bends.
Yep.
Like I'm certainly concerned about keeping the bends in the middle if we do this.
But here's the other, you may lose the structure at that point, but you're not holding as much water back. So the flooding would be less.
Well, that's the question is, would you be holding less water back if it starts by building up a pile of ice behind the fence and a pile of sticks, you get a big beaver dam, it backs up behind it because it's reducing flow, and we know there's way more flow than, it's only ever reduced flow a little bit. And when it reduces flow a little bit, it allows water to back up behind it. And so it seems like what we're doing here, I'm still concerned about whether or not,
So I guess what's the
what
alternative?
happens during, certainly cladding it, I think I'd like to hear, whether or not that's an option. And then, there's another suggestion about whether we could, pour concrete into the middle of it, use it as a form.
That's one of the reasons that we're looking at doing the temporary work we're doing, is to try to save as much of the rest of the structure as we can. So if that's one of the options going forward, we can save the rest of the structure and use that, and it would also be dewatered in that center channel. So it allows for easier access for construction. And we could also put a 60-inch pipe through it, so we could do a low-level outlet in the future. Those are all options that come 2 years down the road that
Right.
that will be looked at once we get this going.
And I guess the
deter
core,
the engineers.
the core question for me though is, I get the emergency situation, but it sounds like the mitigation, I'm concerned that the mitigation action actually makes the possibility of disaster more likely, not less.
The concern though is if the disaster occurs with that dam there,
Yep.
and the dam fails, you're gonna cause a lot more damage than if we do the mitigation effort and we get that 100-year flood. At least then, most of the water has already been released and the pond is only holding a little bit back.
Maybe.
The city won't be liable.
But we did what we were told by the engineers.
Sure, and I guess this is why I want the engineers to hear this scenario and answer it, because I think it's a reasonably likely scenario that during a flood, this dam will get backed up and end up with a lot of water behind it, and then the backup will break. And so I guess I want to hear why the engineers think this is going to be a better solution than that.
Okay, so I think we take a pause a second, okay? And we hear you, right? We hear you, we heard the residents and the things and all this, the braces, we heard all of that. So the reason when we started talking to the Hydro Dam folks, and Anasha, you were on those emails as well, and I don't know if you're on the phone calls, the Hydro Dam folks actually brought to us an engineer, and it was council president, it was because for some reason he was added to the conversation. It wasn't us, okay? So just kind of keep in mind that Ampersand actually came back with a different opinion, right? So that opinion went to DEC. January, we're gonna meet with them because DEC said, we wanna hear this, we wanna value this, we wanna understand. We have one engineering firm who didn't necessarily stamp, it's a retired PE, a report that says that they found that the dam was safe. We have another report that says it's not. And then there's somewhere in the middle that we have to have a conversation. In doing that, we need to make sure that DEC either retracts that statement and that letter to us and says it's not a safety issue, or it is. Right now, we have a letter that says it's a safety issue. And yes, I understand we need to do due diligence to do everything we possibly can. You keep talking about ice and those kinds of things. We can have a springtime thaw that doesn't involve any ice, or a crazy winter or summer storm that doesn't have that as well. So it's yes, there's gonna be ice flow issues, ice jam issues potentially, but at the end of the day, we have to listen to the engineers and we have to take this information back to them, and we certainly have and we will. But at the meantime, we need to come together with these two differing opinions and solve that first at this point in time, because there's a liability on the city right now because there's a letter out there stating it, and we're not getting any absorption of liability from the company who's saying otherwise.
Sure.
So we got to figure that out and come to terms with that group. And they've been great to work with. They've been at the table. They've been very proactive. And they also have, I know that they're engaging with the community representatives as well. I know that there's a preservation group that kind of formed, which is awesome. But we need to come to terms with those first, and we'll take those back to the engineers and make sure that it might be a solution for the middle. Okay.
When is the liability removed from the city?
Well, the city's always liable because we own it. But right now, because it is flagged as an emergency issue from DEC, we are under liability right now. If we take no action, right? If we take no action and we still have that letter from DEC reliable.
Why does the city own this dam?
What?
Good question.
Why does the city own this
I
dam?
don't know, I'd love for Ampersand to buy it.
Sell it to them for $1, I'll give them $1.
They could have a great community outreach program with a group up in the Mount Ida.
I mean, it is state water, right?
Councilmember
It's what?
Kennedy.
It's state water, right?
No, it's a Hudson River estuary, but it's not state water.
It's owned by the people who are to the center line of the stream on either side.
I actually believe Brunswick owns it, so.
Yeah,
I
Councilmember.
was gonna state for the record that I do believe if Ampersand has a vested interest, they should be encouraged and to make a monetary contribution that is representative of their interest in the stake of the dam.
That's one of the reasons why they've been involved with this entire process.
And,
Council President.
Councilmember December. Is there an emergency action plan on file for this, Chris? Or,
Since it's currently classified as a Class A dam, there is not.
Okay.
Class
but
Bs
if
and
it
Class
jumps
Cs
to Class
require.
B,
Yes.
it'll have to have the,
Yep.
okay. Thank you.
And what would cause that jump? I'm sorry, I know you explained it a little bit. Can you just,
Class A means if it were to breach under a storm, under a 100-year storm event, it doesn't cause any damage downstream or minimal damage. The Class B, it's all based on either a property value or so many properties within the flood zone that then bump it up to Class B or the Class C, which is a high hazard dam, which causes significant flooding and damage.
Do we have a model of how much of a flood it would have to be to jump the banks at all in a breach situation?
I didn't have to run every scenario.
25-year flood?
We ran what was required to
Okay.
DEC, which is the 100-year flood. It's typically what they look at.
Gotcha.
Even as the dam sits right now, it's called deficient, because if a 100-year flood were to occur, the abutments are not high enough to contain the floodwaters.
And that's where this flooding in the cemetery comes from, or?
Yeah.
So I guess what is the next step on getting answers on the pros and cons of this mitigation action? Because it sounds like that's not currently in the discussion with Kleinschmidt or the DEC or Schnabel.
Since it's,
Wondering, sort of, do I need to come make a presentation to them? Do you understand the concern there that I'm addressing? I was hoping that we'd have answers to that this week.
and that's where, as Monica stated, the city's on the hook for this.
Yeah.
Recommendation coming from our engineers with probably over 100 years of experience within that engineering firm, plus the other engineering firm that has specific knowledge and is a professional engineer with wooden structures, specifically dams like this, have come forth with a plan of action. So once this plan of action is implemented, to me, that would shift the liability to them if it doesn't work.
Certainly. But nonetheless, I don't want to see neighbors flooded
Nobody
away.
wants to see that.
And so I guess I just want to make sure that they thought through this scenario and modeled what happens if it gets clogged and floods.
Correct, they have, and I think they mentioned at the public meeting.
Yeah, at the public meeting, they said during high water, it would still back up almost as much as it currently was,
Yep.
which is where this concern is
And then
coming.
when the water recedes, we get in, clean everything out, and get it back to normal.
Right, but if it's backed up, I mean, I would think that no random assortment of sticks is gonna be as strong as even a cracked dam.
You never know. It could be a tree. If it is ice, I've seen ice do amazing things.
What comes.
But the idea behind that is, even if you were to lose the structure and that concern, there's not that much water behind the dam to cause the flooding issue downstream.
I mean, that's not really what they said during the public meeting.
Because at that point, if you still have that opening in the dam that's still relieving some water, and you're in your flood zone, you have a chunk of ice stuck in there, and you lose the structure may be lost, but it wouldn't be the complete failure of the entire dam with 4 feet of water going over the top.
Sure.
Deputy Mayor?
We're gonna go back and forth about this all the time, Anasha, all right? So
Okay.
why don't we get the information, let's meet with Ampersand and their engineers. It's gotta come quicker than later because DEC won't release that permit until they've had this full conversation, all right? And then we'll look into all of that and then we'll report back at the next meeting, and if there's anything updated before that, we'll certainly let you know. And honestly, if it's all of a sudden DEC says, maybe they'll agree with the other engineer, right? But that's gotta have a stamp on it in order for them to remove that flag.
Right.
So we have to make sure that all of those pieces are in place. We are under warning right now,
Sure.
right? We can't ignore that. The Schnabel report went to DEC as they were required to do, and they took action based on that report. And now we have this competing report, and we'll make sure that all the due diligence is done with the company as a group, and all of the dam safety people, DEC, Army Corps, all of those people will be present in that conversation.
Great.
And Mike, I mean.
So, and I guess the
representatives-
challenge is that there are two questions. One is a mitigation action necessary because it could fail? And that one, I think, that sounds like there's a good discussion happening that'll get resolved. The question of which mitigation action, I just want to make sure that's also on the table.
Yes.
Maybe we can get assurance from both engineers that will be looked at and addressed in the next couple. I mean, this is something that I brought forward 2 weeks ago, and I was hoping that we would get some answers from them on that explicitly at this meeting. But
Well, I mean, keep in mind also that if we change the design, we have to submit that back to DEC to amend the permit,
sure,
the application for the permit. So that's all a part of that process.
but if we make it
The
worse,
engineers are looking at it also.
Right, their engineers are reviewing this as well. So I mean, we will, yes, Anasha, I hear you.
Okay,
We'll
thank
make sure that takes care of it.
Thank you, Anasha. So Council President and Councilmember Kennedy,
I
You guys
was
are-
just going,
Okay.
I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear from Mike, from the hydro. Obviously, you're a huge stakeholder here, and I'd like to hear your thoughts,
Thank you.
like you're kind of early.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam President, council members. I'm Mike Tucker. In 1983, Bill Vance and I built the Mount Ida hydroelectric facility. It goes back to the days of Benjamin Marshall and Troy's industrial history. And as you know, both the city's dam and the Ida Lake and the hydro facility down to its tail race are included in the Posting Kill Gorge Historic District that was created in 1978. And at the time we built the facility, we had to abide by all of the SHPO regulations that related to it. I think it's fairly clear that Ampersand's concern is that if in the process of breaching the dam to address the issues that the city's identified through their engineer, releases significant amounts of sediment, that sediment will do two things. One, it will fill in the intake area of the hydro plant, shutting it down, and any sediments that enter into the penstock and go down through the system will hit the blades. Fortunately, because the city is also liable to hydro owners as a result of its requirement to maintain the dam, and the indication is that it's in this condition based on the pictures you've seen, which are the same pictures that Kleinschmidt used to make its evaluation that the dam is not as in bad as a condition as Schnabel has predicted. The reality is that the city could have up to a $500,000 claim by the hydro owner if that dam either goes out and if it goes out in a natural disaster, there's no liability under state law. But if the sediment is released as part of their action because of their failure to maintain it over the years, it would result in a lawsuit against the city. So we're trying to balance, and I want to point out.
Can I ask
Council
just
President and then
I'm
Councilmember
sorry.
Kennedy.
I'm sorry, Chair. Is there a certain amount of flowage that we are responsible for? or
No, it's
No.
run of river. But
Okay.
I want to
You
just
do
point
have
out,
to run
that
of the river?
as the
Okay.
deputy mayor indicated, we've had a great dialogue, a great open relationship. I mentioned to the mayor recently that your experience with Chris Whalen has been above anything that we've experienced in other situations. Openness, no angles, no agendas, and we appreciate that. I think DEC's concern that they've expressed to us is twofold. One, they don't want to see this done without seeing a plan to rebuild the dam. And I know as in some of the correspondence we've had from Chris, his question is what's going to happen in 2 years, which leads people to wonder whether there'll ever be a dam rebuilt there. They're also worried about the DEC habitat. People are concerned about if it's not rebuilt, there's a tremendous valuable in their mind habitat in the lake, and they want to be sure that that's sustained. We think that in 1968, the U.S. Geological Service stopped monitoring the flow of this stream. We have the best records of the flow because of what the plant has been able to generate. And we look forward to seeing the Schnabel model. It wasn't completed. I guess it's completed now.
Yes.
And the city has indicated that they would share it with us. I think Monica's absolutely right. I mean, DC is going to have to weigh the issues here. And if they decide that they want to go forward, I believe that there's an agreement between Ampersand and the city to participate with the contractor to observe how they're going to do the work, because contractor may have to indemnify the city that if they go in there and let all that loose, because it's very hard to control silt and high waters, that any damage to the hydro plant would be on the contractor. So while the city had asked Ampersand to indemnify them if they didn't go ahead with breaching the dam, their contractor should indemnify the hydro plant for any damage that they would do by negligence in terms of a process that there could be a point where the contractor says, I can't do this I cannot guarantee that doing this work at this time of year would result in no damage to the facility. So we want to work through this. In 1999, we rebuilt the dam with the city. Mayor Patterson was the mayor. The dam was in worse shape in 1999, and it took us 2 years to get the grant and redesign that dam. And the city, we provided assistance to the city, and we have a lovely letter from Mayor Patterson thanking us for ensuring the protection of an environmental, recreational, and historic treasure of the city of Troy.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Yeah, just, thank you for speaking. Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Is there some kind of documentation or a legal opinion that would lead to the city being liable for silt?
If the
overflow?
silt was released because of the failure to maintain a dam that failed, yes.
But if we're still maintaining it and we're breaching it, if we're still maintaining the
It
dam.
needs to be breached because of the failure of the city to maintain it over the last 20 years.
But is there anyone that says that the amount of silt flowing through it that's just the natural flow of silt?
No, once you release, see, when the water hits the
No, I
dam, the
know.
silt drops out.
I understand
So
how
if it was
silt
run
works.
of river, there'd be no silt.
Is there anywhere you're referencing to that's some kind of legal precedent or
We have looked at, our
Or
clients have looked at the
legal
statute.
regulations,
Yes, they
education
they have,
that says sediment flow coming out of a dam, no matter what the state of the dam, can potentially the person managing the dam would be liable for silt flowing downstream?
the case law that I reviewed indicated that a dam owner who fails to maintain the dam and upon a breach results in damage to a downstream owner of property is liable. You need to talk to your corporation counsel about the specifics of this, but
My guess is that it would be water damage, not silt damage.
well, the damage is going to be to the equipment because you're going to have stones and gravel going through a stainless steel blade that's now going to have to be rebuilt.
Did the hydrogram put the city on liability the last time?
Sorry?
Was the city liable for the damage that occurred in 99 or 97?
The damage in 97, I don't recall it was actually,
The turbines were damaged, correct?
no, because we had to put the turbines, in 97, we went to the city and said the dam's needs to be repaired. And then we got the grant for them. And
But it breached though.
it was damaged, but it didn't breach. As I recall, it didn't breach.
Break down
Yeah.
So what happened then?
Well, I think the issue is,
Well, do you have an insurance policy now that would cover the dam in the event that there would be some kind of?
there's business interruption insurance that if there was a situation that shut it down, but then the insurance company's gonna come after you. So,
After who?
city,
How do you know that?
well, again, if the dam breaches because of a 100-year flood, there's no damage, there's no liability to the owner of a dam because they could not foresee that. But if you're not maintaining your dam and there's damage to a downstream user, I think the only issue I have is the fact that to the extent that the city is concerned about downstream property owners, it's not clear that they include the hydro owner in that umbrella. I think they do, but they're focused on residents. And so I think that we just need to make that distinction that, we're protecting under a very unusual event would have to occur for residents at the lower end of the city before the river could be damaged, where you're looking at almost imminent danger to a business at the top of the river.
Has the board of directors of the dam discussed what kind of monetary contribution they'd be willing to make to repair the dam to their?
Well, we went and got a grant from the state last time, and we paid, we didn't charge them for our work to get the grant. And we got the grant from DEC, and then the city used the grant to hire Kleinschmidt to do the work to build this dam. And so when Kleinschmidt comes and looks at those pictures and says they have an understanding of what the condition of the dam, it's not as if they've never seen the dam before. They designed it for the city, and Carver Construction built the dam for the city using the grant.
So has your board of directors discussed whether or not they would support
I think
financial contribution to the future?
Yeah, so I just wanna make
Anyway,
sure,
into,
yeah, I don't wanna be, at a battle right now.
Oh,
We have a
yeah, we're
partner.
working
No, no,
together.
Right, and even some of the statements that Mike said, and I love Mike, I've known him for a long time, it could be foreseen as a little bit more threatening, so to speak, as far as
Yeah, I
the
just wanna
lawsuits and
make
stuff
sure
like that.
that
So
everything's.
we're in this together, and again, this goes back to two differing engineering reports. According to their engineering report, we would be covered, right? Because there's no damage to they're saying that the dam is fine, right? So we have their report that says that. So if something occurs right now, their report says that. That's why we have to get clarity around this, and that's why we have to get crystal through DEC, our state agencies that we report to, as well as those. And I think just to kind of reiterate and reassure Mike and his team, we are on phone calls with them multiple times. We are meeting with them, with the agencies, so we do understand that there is another private individual, a company that we also are calling into circumspect here, in addition to that downstate. You can't look at that modeling map and not say we have to be aware of what happens downstream on that, because there's a significant amount of damage that could occur, provided we have that kind of significant flooding. So we're taking into all of that into context. And again, I don't want to get into this antagonistic relationship with them off the get-go, so.
the only thing is, I think Monica is absolutely correct. We have had a great relationship from the 30 years that Bill Vance and I owned this facility, and the last 3 years that Ampersand has owned it. I think the only reason that I raised that was in either Monica or Chris's comments, they said that Ampersand wouldn't indemnify the city against the damage. And there's also a corollary side to that. It wasn't meant to be threatening. It was meant to show that, this is a very difficult situation because, there are, if one of us is right, it's good. If we're both wrong, it's going to be bad for everyone, residents, city, and the owner.
Yeah, Council President.
This may sound corny. Would it make sense, and I mean, I understand timing, et cetera, but actually getting all the parties, DEC,
We're trying,
That's
Army Corps.
That's our meeting.
Okay,
I
great.
think I
That's our
saw
meeting.
almost 9 people pick.
All,
Yep.
all stakeholders?
Yeah.
We're already doing that.
Awesome.
I did
Very
do a
good.
poll this week.
Yep, and,
Very good.
Chris tried to set it up for this week, but DEC had some
So that's,
scheduling
okay,
issues.
fair enough.
But I think it's going to work out. Obviously, your question about Ampersand's willingness to participate, they have to know what they're going to participate in. And I think that, once we determine that, and I do think that it's important to maintain the dam. And I think that's why the city had to rebuild it the last time, is because that's where the SHPO letter comes in. They want to maintain the historic character of the historic district, and so they're the historic records.
Mr. Chair, and that meeting will include, somebody from the group, the now kind of.
Ampersand.
No, but the rest,
Ampersand.
okay.
Well, Anasha's in the email group.
So, we're looking forward to working through this. We think that, again, the city has been very cooperative. They've been very open. With Ampersand is from Canada. It was unfortunate that they weren't aware of this until the October meeting was advertised. But the minute we found that out, the next day, we emailed the deputy mayor and we were on the phone that afternoon. So, you couldn't expect any better cooperation and coordination. And again, I didn't mean to get adversarial, but there are two sides to the coin.
So I just want to clarify a couple things. Mike had stated about DEC. So they've had several conversations with DEC, then we have had several conversations, and there was a comment made about rebuilding the dam. We haven't had that indication from DEC yet. They're taking a look at that. They're talking about us. They know we're reaching out to the community, get community input on this as well too. So that could be a very separate conversation, but that could be something that comes to light in January when we have a bigger context meeting. And then also in relationship to, there was one other thing, I just lost it in my head, sorry. The SHPO letter. So this literally 502, this came in, right? And so the SHPO is stating they would, they want to see some sort of a structure. Chris talked about that. I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that. It says that in there. We have to see what that is, right? We got to look at the cost. The mayor has said at the public meeting, we'll build whatever you want to pay for. So we need to take a look at that, but that is the recommendation to them. And again, how is that paid for, right? And what is the best solution if that's the direction we're going to go? So it is stated in there, so that is something that we have to take into consideration because that is officially a part of our application and our permit approval for the piece, okay? So I just want to reassure the public that we saw it and it'll be part of our review, okay?
And we're happy to figure out how to fund it through either state or federal grants.
Or both.
And I know you do have some FEMA money that was already allocated to this project. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Cummings.
One more side to all this. Councilman Kennedy and I got to go up to a meeting in Poston Kill a couple weeks ago or maybe last week. Time is flying. With the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance, who are undergoing a project right now, trying to work with the community out there to increase the ability of the broader Poston Kill watershed to absorb flood spikes and dissipate it over a longer period of time. And my understanding is there's some funding for that. So certainly want to encourage you to reach out to Land Trust if you haven't already and get briefed on that project. But also I think some of these modeling could be very helpful for that in terms of making it clear that to the DEC and other possible funding sources that there is significant property damage threat in maximum flood conditions, and anything we can do along this watershed to help dissipate those floods is going to be really helpful to the people of Little Italy. And I could imagine as part of that broader project, they did actually talk about dams and impoundments as part of that, as one of the things, if you have a properly managed sluicegate where you're able to let water out. And again, I think there's debate about how much volume this area could hold, but I think that's sort of the strategy they're looking at broadly, is to have a whole bunch of places doing a little bit so that we don't have spikes that get to the point where they're flooding the neighborhood. So certainly just want to encourage you to reach out to them there and sort of start to have that conversation with the DEC around where funding could come from in order to make sure that we aren't in any increase. I think we also recognize that these sort of intense flood conditions are becoming more and more likely as the climate changes, and therefore anything we can do to help reduce the likelihood that impacts the neighbors here, I think is helpful.
And I would just like to say, I know I've been in touch with some of the community members who've been working on this. Thank you for keeping up with the questions. And I will state again, my concerns do relate to what the impact is in our lower part of our city, the Little Italy and Osgood neighborhoods. But I certainly look forward to continuing this dialogue. And if everybody is okay, we can open up to the public hearing section. Now, this is a public hearing, so what I would ask Chris is if there's members of the public that would like to speak, and if there's questions, Chris, can you just take down the questions and ensure we can get a response back to the public?
We'll have all the
Thank you,
comments
Deputy Mayor.
Brianna.
Yeah, let's go through the comments first, and then we can go back to Chris at the end. Okay, so if anyone would like to speak, remember there is a 5-minute limit on public hearing. And state your name and address for the record.
It's Brian Caird, I live on 50 Bowling Avenue. Kind of answer to your question, was the city indemnified, I think the last at 97. The dam kind of went down in stages. We fixed it in 97 by putting a landfill liner underneath it, brought the level of dam down, because we weren't able to put the metal cap across the top again. It slowly disintegrated over the next couple of years, but the whole dam didn't fail and down to the bedrock until about, was it 2000?
Yeah.
And the reason it failed dead was not because the dam fell on itself. What happened was they came in with the shovels and they tried to mitigate it and decided that they were going to take out the whole dam and rebuild it. So that's the reason why it was clear for the sediment to go all the way downstream. It didn't, well, just the top of it, not the whole bit, not the whole dam. Basically, where a breach, what happened before was the sluice gate rusted out and that collapsed, and that allowed for a small stream to go through there on the bottom. And so what we did was that drained the pond. So what happened was my brother used to work for a company that made landfill liners. And we got the, on South Lake, people, the Army Reserve up there, they gave us a bunch of sandbags. And so we were able to basically cover up the sluice gate. And that brought the dam level, the water level back up and filled the dam back, or the pond back up. But the thing was, unfortunately, because there was nothing protecting the top of the dam with the metal plates gone, that's what it was able to gradually deteriorate. And that's what's going to happen if you try and do this again. Because if you leave the middle of the dam exposed, it's just going to eventually crash up, just demolish the whole dam. And you need the sediment packed there, a couple of feet over the top of the protecting the plants. Okay?
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Further comments from the public? Reminder, just state your name and address.
Sure. My name is Michael Easterbrook. I live at 12 London Avenue. I guess I just want to take a little bit of time to thank both Chris and Monica. I'm actually really pleased, I think, with how this meeting is going, and I feel like heard from the emails I've been sending. Thanks to everybody participating in this process. So I just want to start out, and a lot of this is going to be a little bit of reiterating what's already been heard, but by restating the premise on which the decision to dismantle a 30-foot section of the dam as soon as possible was established, as I understand it. So in 2011, Hurricane Irene caused major flooding damage throughout New York. As we heard, the abutments were identified as an issue, so the FEMA money was granted for various projects, including $900,000 roughly to repair the concrete abutments for the Ida Lake Dam. Due to a series of issues internally in the city, I guess the execution of that FEMA money to fix the abutments began maybe in August of this year, roughly, which triggered Schnabel Engineering to be hired to inspect the dam for this, that work. During that time, that inspection, inspectors noted from the dam that most of the dam on the flanks and the bends were in good condition. However, the very center of the dam, roughly that 30-foot section that was proposed to take out, the horizontal wood planks were damaged in Hurricane Irene, cracked on the lakeside, and then subsequent rot from those cracks is what has caused this bowing under the static pressure of the water impounded by the dam. And so that damage is what classifies the dam as unsound. They clarified that the unsound classification, again, this is kind of what we've been over with this 100-year line, that classification was kind of assigned on the possibility of a perfect storm major weather event, and that otherwise the dam is unlikely to fail under normal rain conditions. It was further asserted that the risk associated with the dam flooding was to the properties along Iodine Canal Street, as we've also seen. And I guess I also just want to point out on this map that there's two maps that are going around. One is 100% of the 100-year breach. There's also a 150% map. So just like be clear that you're noticing what's going on there. And I guess also I would say that if the red line outlines what is what is flooded during a 100-year event, and then the blue that extends beyond the red line is the potential of the dam breach. It's not, most of that area is already flooded, and if you would see the area covered that is significantly larger than the size of the dam.
This is the Class B classification, and the other one's for Class A.
Right. So this is.
That's for Class B.
Yep.
Which is not labeled right now, but.
So I guess just looking at it, and so recently there was I've been out on Mount Ida Lake, and you can stick an oar down. It's currently like maybe 3 or 4 feet deep. The oar is still above the lake by like a foot, I would say. And if you just look at the area of the lake versus the area covered in that floodplain in South Troy, and you say 4 feet divided by that area, you're looking at maybe an extra foot of water that gets spread out, right? If you understand, like the calculation I'm making in my head, I think is sound. If you have 4 feet and you have 4 times the area, it's roughly a foot of water. So I guess I would just make the statement that the risk there is to be clear on this map is like an extra foot or 2 of water, which causes the extension beyond that red line. Based on the information, and again, that's also from a major storm event. Based on this information, as we've heard, the mitigation action is to dismantle a 30-foot section of the dam at the center as soon as possible. And it was explained at previous city meetings the dam could not be repaired due to DEC legislation introduced following Irene that wood isn't an allowed material for dam construction, and that the FEMA money could only be used for the abutments and not the dam itself. It was also emphasized at this meeting that this action is only temporary. So now I kind of want to get into now that that's the premise. So for the engineering report, that's the first thing. The inspection.
And Michael, just so you got about a minute left.
Ah, damn.
I got
You can always, no, don't swear. You can always, it's Christmas, don't swear. So you can submit them to,
No, you
so
said the dam, not
dam.
Yeah, everybody, Deputy Mayor.
So
Okay.
Michael, if you get run on time, so give them 20
Definitely
extra
run on
seconds.
Yes,
So
yes.
you
Your time
can
is
email them
up.
to us and we'll put them up on the website. Okay.
Oh man, all right.
We'll start that clock again. You got a minute to go.
Okay. So I would just I'd like to reiterate, Monica mentioned, it's in the engineering firm, Schnabel Engineering's best interest to be as conservative as humanly possible, to limit their own personal liability, but also to open up opportunity for bids on future construction projects. Also, there's not many wooden dams, as I understand, and so I would suspect that their expertise is probably in concrete or steel. That's probably what they're used to seeing. So they're maybe not used to seeing wood, where flexing is kind of an expected part of the design. I would say, I mentioned before the DEC and regarding their policy on wood dams. I went through their owner's guidance manual and information for dam owners. I couldn't find anything citing that wood wasn't allowed, so I'm wondering if DEC could be pressured more about that feedback and if maybe we could repair the dam. And this is the major part that I really want to get to. Okay, so it was noted in the previous meeting that this is also speaking to like the action being temporary and if what we will build what you want to pay for. So it was noted in a previous meeting the dam's structural integrity is compromised by dismantling it. So it's structurally intact when the whole thing is in one piece, but when you take it apart, it's going to be less sound, which opens it up being basically you can't repair it. You got to rebuild it. And so in 1998, it was rebuilt out of wood for $188,000, also stated in a previous meeting. A new concrete dam is estimated to cost between $500,000 and like $1.5 million. And it's been further noted that FEMA money of that's left, roughly $800,000, could be applied to be used potentially for other projects if the dam is decommissioned. So I just want to emphasize that if we go forward with this action, I feel like there's potentially putting $500,000 to $2 million between this action and a new dam, where repair, even if it costs what it costs to rebuild the whole thing out of wood in 1998, is $188,000 would be less of money. So building what you want to pay for, I would want to repair it than rebuild a new dam. And I'm really excited that we're having a conversation with Ampersand and Kleinschmidt, who originally built, because I think they're really important from an engineering perspective.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to stop it at some point. But if you do have more to add, if you could give it to our city clerk.
I'll put it on the minutes.
So this is just this has come up before. This is the 1939 article. The same arguments kind of come out about South Troy being in trouble and people wanting to save the lake. And well, we've had a dam for so long, so maybe some of this information would be useful to going forward.
Thank you, Michael.
I love your shirt.
Thanks.
Love it.
Would you like to speak? Yes. State your name and address for the record.
I'm Jennifer Quinn, 50 Brunswick Road, which is directly above the dam. And I thank you all for taking the time to speak with us. One thing I'd like to ask is for a lot more ease of public involvement. So it was really hard to find out that this meeting was happening, really hard. So I'd like you guys to do more outreach.
Are you on the mailing list, an email list?
I don't know.
Did you go to the first meeting at the Masonic Lodge?
Yeah.
You did? Did you sign up on the thing?
So I have to be on, I can do an email list for that.
So see the gentleman in the back, if you give him.
I looked all.
That's
over the
actually a good
website.
point. I think we both were on that one too, and we haven't been receiving it.
Okay, so
John, could you look back at that mailing list and just make sure
There's nothing on the city's website.
well, it was a council meeting, was the staff. So, okay, so if you just make sure John has your email. And then what we'll do is the January meetings, the other general services meetings, we'll make sure that we put out to the email blast as well as whatever you guys do on yours.
If you wanna, at the back of the room, there's an orange piece of paper that's my email list, the city clerk email list, where I email all the council meetings. And so if you wanna sign up for that, and we send those notices out.
We'll get you multiple notices.
Facebook, Twitter.
You're saying it's on there? That there's a meeting about the dam?
Yeah.
It's the general services meeting, yeah, that's the name of the meeting, that was the.
I think that your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we
yes,
hear you,
absolutely.
we hear you.
I worked hard.
No, we'll hear you.
Yes.
You're right.
Oh, and then the other thing is, that I'd really like to hear some kind of commitment from the city that you're gonna restore the lake. So, I get the emergency issues and obviously we're debating how much of an emergency it is and what the likelihood of a 150-year flood is versus a tree clogging up the dam and throwing all the ice back in my yard. But I don't hear anybody saying, we, the city, care that there's a lake there and all the things that that represents, and we're gonna make sure it's back. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Chair?
Council President.
State we do.
Oh,
to Talbot too. I will respond.
certainly, yeah, and I think everyone here does care about the ecology of our lake, and I'll give the deputy a chance to respond later after comments.
You don't?
Okay, Councilmember Kennedy doesn't. Suzanne? Name and address for the record, please.
Suzanne Petty, I live at 64 Pauling Avenue, I'm across,
It's a temporary.
I live across the street from Mount Ida Lake for the last 10 years, and, I'm pretty devastated about this plan. I have several questions about it, but first of all, I just wanted to mention, because it wasn't brought up at this meeting, I don't know if you are aware that on December 8th, the Rensselaer Alliance is going to try and put a nature preserve off in Colvin Lane up in the east side of Troy, and it's my understanding that there is a parcel of land that is between Mount Ida Lake and this area that it's on 64 acres, and as far as I know, they're moving forward with this project, which would be a real asset to Troy, and they could actually join this preserve with this piece of land that Troy already owns and the lake. So our position is, as residents, and I have gathered so far 285 signatures, we do not want to see the lake drained. We want to see the lake preserved. We want the dam repaired. There's a lot of questions why it hasn't been maintained. That does consequently end up with negligence on the part of the city of Troy. So we shouldn't be losing our lake because somebody wasn't doing the right thing. And it's nothing against Mayor Madden because, he wasn't mayor when a lot of this stuff was going on. So, we can't point fingers, but the bottom line is not one person has mentioned, even tonight at this meeting, the devastating environmental impact on this area. And I've gotten it from people that, very professional in the Environmental Protection Agency that said that is going to be a very, very bad decision to drain that lake, that it can be environmentally disastrous for that area, and the damage will last for years. There's a rare bird that breeds over there. It's near extinction. I've had biologists forward me reports that did plant studies. There's a lot of plant species. The beaver itself is a protected mammal for the state of New York. So, there's just, I don't understand why no one's looking at the damage to the environment with all of that. I also, wonder why no one's looking at what kind of a mosquito problem this is going to create, because last June, Governor Cuomo issued a report that the West Nile virus has been all over New York State. I mean, it's going to create a huge, huge mosquito problem. We have a lot of students that jog up in that area. We have the girls from Emma Willard that jog by all the time, RPI people. I mean, I myself, I'm outside all the time, and just to not have our lake there, it's going to be devastating. And on that note, I don't want to get it to this point, but like I said, I do have 285 residents right now that are supporting that. They are firmly against draining that lake. And I've had one attorney that is an environmental attorney that has willing to take a look at this case, and I get emails all the time. I have one resident right now that's willing to put up $1,000, no questions, because he owns 2 houses nearby. So I really hope that the city does look very carefully at this whole picture, the devastation to our property values. You've got a lot of young families that are rehabbing homes, that have children that thought, they were going to be bringing them up on a lake, and now they're going to have a swamp filled with mosquitoes, bugs, and a lot of them, my next door neighbor did a fabulous job rehabbing one of the east side colonials, and he spent a lot of money on it, and it's just sad that this is just going to happen, and you can't repair this. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but why can't they put a repair in front of the present dam and then take the old dam out when the repair is done? Put stone or something there that would be actually better than having wood. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but that's why I think we do need more input, either from NCON or another engineering firm. Hopefully, Ampersand can provide some of that. I mean, there has to be more options. That's a little baby dam compared to some of them in New York State. And I pulled up the information on
all of the dams in New York State, and that is classified as a Class B as of last August by New York State Department of Econ. So, or it was a Class A back then. So I don't know why Chernobyl all of a sudden came up with another classification. So that needs to be clarified. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I did want to just state for the record too, I know I met with some folks from your group earlier, but I would encourage, personally, I would like to see the Little Italy community somehow involved as a community that could be potentially impacted. So I'd encourage folks, if there's ways that we can start that dialogue with the folks at the bottom of the city, near where I live too, that would be great through this process. And if there's anyone else that would like to speak, yep, come on up.
Carl Backus, 88 Lexington Avenue. Not a really interesting question. So this model, year flood, does this take into account Hudson River rising too?
No.
That does not.
Would liability be taken off the city in that section if the Hudson breached the banks? So no matter what, if this floods anything? So you just go by with the red line, that'd be the extent that the city is responsible for in case of.
City's liable for that anyway. It's the extra blue line around it that is the liability of the dam breach.
Okay, that's all I want, because I know it's the Hudson not accounted for. I know in 1919, that was the biggest we've seen since, I think. And that breach, that covered up to, if I remember right, 4th Street. And even farther actually back, so I'm just wondering what that impact would be. So, and with this model, they account for the upper part of the Boson Hill? Because it seems like it just starts at the dam and then goes.
And
Okay, so they don't account for water, well, the amount of water for the whole,
No,
it's the amount of water for the whole.
it's the 100-year flood for the amount of water that would be coming down the stream.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Carl. Further comments? Step on up. State your name and address for the record.
Kevin Kowski, I live at 1 Linden Avenue, and this is something way beyond what we're talking to tonight, but just to keep it in the back of your minds. The cemetery in the entrance on the Posting Hill there, I would imagine equipment and machinery would have to get in. I don't know if that would be a dismantling of some of the posts that we've just already reconstructed. So just what kind of impact that would have on, construction vehicles sitting out, and then on the other side, the Eagle Park, Boy Scout Park, I guess would be an easier access, but I'd just be concerned with and I would like to get to know what kind of impact that would have on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Further comments?
Mark Heffernan, 34 Brunswick Road, right upstream of the dam. Again, I'm, to reiterate what people are saying, I'm glad to be hearing this conversation. I think that it's, it's furthering the thought that's going into this action, which I think is a good thing. I want to see that this action doesn't add to the list of actions carried out by Troy that don't have a follow-up plan. One of which we're standing in right now, still paying rent on. I think that the community engagement that we've seen is quite impressive from my perspective. And it really takes a crisis to bring people out to this. And I had one woman that I was speaking to that called it a crisis-tunity. I thought it was an apt term. Crisis. Just to reiterate what Jenny said, that I would like to see more opportunity for engagement by the public You know, we had that, the October 30th meeting, boy, how many attendees were there? It must have been in excess of, 100 people. And the city does have the email list for those attendees, so, you know, I don't know what that email list is going to use for, but I would like to see engagement of those interested citizens. So again, a question, I just want to clarify this question on the map here, that we're looking at a 100-year flood, which is the red line. And a 100-year flood with an instantaneous dam breach.
It's the blue line.
The blue
shaded area.
is the difference between the red line and the blue area outside that line.
100-year and naturals in an overflow.
That's
breach,
with the addition of the volume, of the estimated volume of Ida Lake.
Everything came out behind it, right?
One concern and question that I have about that model is that the you know, floods happen progressively as water comes downstream. A breach of that dam would not happen presumably instantaneously, but it would happen progressively as one failure happened, and then it led to subsequent failures. I suppose that it would happen over you know, at least a few hours if there were a failure of that dam. And so is that an instantaneous snapshot of what happens if you take that, you know, however many cubic feet of water and just add it?
That's all design standards from the DEC based on dam safety requirements. So it's engineering calculations that predict what that model is going to show.
We can see if we get that, if it's an instantaneous or if it's a slower.
Because, I mean, I'm not a hydrologist, but I understand that hydrology happens over time, and that's the whole thing. And just to add to the opinions by licensed and accredited engineers, I'd like to read from the CDM report in 2012, section 4.4, hazard classifications. This was a report done in 2012 after Hurricane Irene. CDM performed a field reconnaissance of the downstream area to verify that the buildings, railroad, and environmentally sensitive areas downstream of Ida Lake Dam. The area downstream of Ida Lake consists of high banks that will likely be able to contain flood flows. The Ida Lake Dam is appropriately classified as a low hazard dam, Class A. And that is the opinion of CDM as of May 2012 upon their analysis. So just to add to, I know we have a couple of competing engineering opinions here, but yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
To the president, the council, and deputy mayor. Great, thank you. Mayor. Thank you.
Further comments? Okay, not seeing any. Chris, would you like to, Chris, Deputy Mayor, whichever you choose, would you like to just give a response to the comments? I think I might keep you guys to 5 minutes too.
Listen, all right, so I wrote everybody's name and I wrote what I needed to talk about. So, Brad, we do have some of the information from the 97 to 99, 2000 situation. So it's interesting because I thought some of the stuff was different, but we're actually gonna try to see if we can pull that. I know the mayor found a file in one of the reports, so we'll take a look at that too. So, Michael, the wood engineer, you mentioned the wood engineer. One of the engineers is actually, one of his expertises is in timber dams. So that was one of the ones that actually did the inspection as well too. Chris mentioned that. The liability, I didn't think I said the liability of the engineer or potential for future construction for them. I meant more so about the liability if it were to breach, that the PE stamp would make them liable, is what I wanted to clarify. I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to promise future jobs to somebody. I don't know if that was what I meant, but We can certainly ask DEC in our communication with them if they would actually approve a wooden improvement for that dam. It's certainly part of the conversation with them. What does that look like? We haven't gotten any pricing. I think that $500 to $2 million number is out there, but we have not gotten pricing on a concrete structure yet. Just trying to figure out what it is we have to build. Jennifer Quinn, we will certainly make sure that we put those notice of meetings out. Thank you. We are committed to finding the solution for this. I'm a neighbor too. I live on Sheldon. So we know the importance of this area, but we also need to make sure that we know what the maintenance, the long-term maintenance, the long-term costs, the long-term impact to the environment, all of those things are, so that we can all make an educated and very good decision on the future of that. Suzanne, the Rensselaer Land Trust, yes, we've known about that. It's a great opportunity. It's the land up past Elm Grove Cemetery. That's a part of this. It's a huge opportunity for the city. Most of it is actually in Brunswick, which is great for us though too, because all the trails and places lead to that. Beautiful area, so we're very supportive of Rensselaer Land Trust. We've done the Narrows project. The trail along Campbell Avenue is a project that we've partnered with them in the past, so we've done some tremendous partnerships with Rensselaer Land Trust. So we welcome that. As far as community engagement goes, next steps, again, to reiterate what Chris said earlier, this is an emergency situation. The future of the dam and the lake, that's what we need to hear from you. 285 signatures is great. The input from the community is great, and that's what we want to hear. We take that information, we develop the solution, we look at the cost pieces of that, and then we all make a better decision. I do want to state and understand that Fish and Wildlife are a part of the agencies that we are talking to at DEC. So that is a federal wetland. It was noted at the community meeting at the Masonic Lodge. Is in the mapping. So we are very involved. They will regulate us on any of those kinds of things. If there is a situation where we need to make sure endangered animals are protected during that situation, those things are taken into account. We made that statement at the last meeting as well too. The mosquito issue, I'll definitely bring up with the conversation. I think that, some of the stagnant water that's in there too could lend some issues, but we'll certainly make sure that that's a part of the conversation. Classification of the dam. The dam is classified right now as an A. However, some modelings and some of the updated flood maps that we have are potentially leading it to maybe be a classification B, and that is something DEC will have to determine. So we're not saying it's a class B, we're saying that the modeling and the engineering information that we are being provided potentially could make it a classification of a B. That is up for DEC to verify and actually state. Carl, yes, the Hudson River. Kevin will certainly take a look at access points. We're very aware of those pillars. Todd Dickinson and I worked hard on those pillars to make sure they stay standing. So we'll make sure to make people aware of where construction activity is. Mark, over by you, that's where the Boy Scout access point is, the park. So there's a lot of interaction that we have to make sure when we do, if and when we get to construction, we actually take a look at all of those pieces and make sure everybody's aware of what that work is going to impact. Schedule. So yes, Mark, we don't want to have an open-ended date on this. That's why we actually asked for deadlines for the city when we talked to DEC, the proposed schedule that is a part of the application process. We asked for that to keep our toes to the line, to make sure that we were making sure that we adhered to those benchmarks and had to actually get approval if we needed to extend them or something. We'll continue the community engagement. We will make sure that we have more additional meetings as we move forward to look at those next steps. The long-term solutions, those are definitely opportunities. We can certainly reach out to the Masonic Lodge or Masonic Hole again, that was a great location for that. It was close to the community, and certainly taking into account we need to get Little Italy and Osgood into the conversation as well too. We will ask about the instantaneous modeling versus over a period of time. We'll ask the engineering firm about that. And I think I hit them all.
I think you got it.
In 5 minutes.
Yes, Councilmember Cummings.
I had a couple notes of things that I wanted to make sure were addressed. Let's see. Well, certainly, I also wanted to address just the meeting with the Land Trust a couple Saturdays ago. It's certainly an exciting project around the building of preserve up in that neighborhood.
I think that will certainly be part of the conversation moving forward with the long-term action here too, in terms of, I know there was some discussion that when the dam was rebuilt, last time, the height of it was raised a bit, and that actually made it harder for people to walk around the edge of the lake. So it'll be interesting to see some of the modeling as we move forward. And I could imagine a future that includes some kayaking and other recreational opportunities on a pond, but also includes a network of trails around it that connect with some of those other areas. So these are all things that we're certainly thinking a lot about and considering how we tie in with the broader Rensselaer Land Trust and other parks network to make a solution that really is both a good ecological solution and a good environmental, recreational area for everyone there. I did, certainly want to note that there's certainly some existing swamps there right now. So if mosquitoes are a concern, I guess that's certainly something we should be looking into, making sure that we aren't harboring any diseases there. But I don't know that this actually going to change that one way or another. I did want to check in on the mitigation, the access plan for the mitigation action if it were to move forward. Is that through the cemetery or just from the north side of the dam?
For the emergency mitigation, it's going to be from the Brunswick Road side, is what they were looking at, getting access to that side. We were going to mow the grass down, and they were actually going to put a mini barge, I want to say a barge, it's a pontoon boat to work off of, to get that work done.
So at this point, there's no plan to bring heavy equipment through the cemetery? No. Okay, great. Let's see.
There's too many green. And trees.
Just so you know, not only the pillars makes it an issue from the cemetery side, the actual path we'd have to go in, there's actually graves on the path that are from late 1800s. There's no way they're going to handle equipment going over the top of them.
Okay.
So that's
Been the first mayor. No.
Yeah.
Just wanted to double check. Let's see. I did have one other thing come up just in my head for Mount Ida around the silt concerns. Is it primarily concerned with the eroding silt that has built up behind the dam over the last several years? Or is there also a concern sort of long-term with the annual flow of silt that would come down?
It's more the silt that's behind the dam now, because if that dam is not rebuilt, then we'll have to deal with the silts, because they'll drop out in our dam rather than the city's.
Do you have a sense of how long that erosion process would take to sort of clear back out so that you're just getting the silt that's coming
Right
from
now,
upstream?
about every 5 years, we take 5,000 to 6,000 cubic yards of silt out of the intake behind our dam. We have an easement at 3 Linden Avenue, and we have to get a DEC permit, and they go in with a backhoe in the summer when it's low flow. So it's it builds up over time.
So is that current dam, I mean, certainly it's acting as a settling pond, and certainly I imagine it makes it so that it may not reduce the total amount of silt that comes downstream. I don't know. Is the amount of silt behind the dam increasing every year, or is it generally eroding during floods enough that the capacity continues to stay about the
It's there
same?
every year. So another portion of this emergency mitigation, once the pool level is down, we can actually get equipment in there and get silt out and restabilize the capacity of the pond itself to original needs. If it's
So that-
flooded, it's a lot harder to do.
So that both deepens it, increases the amount of flood control, and reduces the amount of need for ongoing silt removal in the long term.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, we certainly don't want 6 inches.
In the 1800s, they'd send someone to Dyken Pond to turn the water off, so that the men at the Ida Mill could work on Monday morning in the drought season. So DEC doesn't let you do that anymore.
And they certainly don't. Chris, can we get a really big pipe just through it? Do you have any of those laying around? All right, thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We will be planning on holding another one of these meetings. We had one scheduled for, if anyone wants to mark their calendars, January 24th, which is the same day of our finance meeting in January, so we'll plan on holding it after that. If something comes up before then, we will be in contact with the administration and we can set something up sooner if we need to. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Aye. Adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
That's